Forget carrots, the ancient seed that modern science is finally catching up to. Then light, warm, golden, pressing through thin curtains like something patient and kind. Margaret is 68 years old, and before she reaches for her phone, before her feet find the floor, before the day has any shape at all, she reaches for the bottle on her nightstand. Small, plastic, nearly empty. Eye drops. The same ones she has used every single morning for 11 years. Dry eyes, blurry mornings. A world that once came into focus on its own, now requiring help just to begin. Doctors told her it was age. Normal, they said. Manageable. She believed them. Then a friend placed a small glass jar in her hands. Inside, tiny black seeds, catching the light like something that had been waiting a very long time to be noticed. Unremarkable, unquestioned, and perhaps entirely unnecessary. A time-lapse unfolds. Phones glowing before alarm clocks sound. Blue light washing over commuter faces. Fluorescent office ceilings humming above tired eyes. Children scrolling on tablets long past midnight. This is not an exception. This is the rhythm of modern life. And the numbers reflect it. 2.2 billion people worldwide live with some form of vision impairment. Dry eye disease alone affects 1 in 4 adults across developed nations. A figure that has doubled in just 20 years. But what if the story we have been told about vision loss is incomplete? That question is no longer coming from the fringes. It is coming from university laboratories in Tehran and Tokyo, Edinburgh and Nebraska. Researchers who have spent years quietly revisiting something that farmers, healers and grandmothers across a dozen cultures already understood. They kept returning to a seed. Something so small it can disappear into the grooves of a fingerprint. Something so ordinary it sits in kitchen spice jars, largely unnoticed, across 3 continents. And yet, inside that seed, researchers have found a concentration of compounds relevant to ocular health so significant that some are calling it one of the most important nutritional discoveries for the human eye in decades. Not a drug, not a procedure, not something invented in the last 50 years. Something ancient, something that was never lost, only overlooked. Not because it lacked power, but because the institutions deciding what counted as knowledge simply were not looking. Suddenly we are high above the earth. Rolling fields of delicate white and violet flowers stretching across the Mediterranean coastline, then the sun-baked plains of the Indian subcontinent, then the highland plateaus of Ethiopia. The same plant, growing wild across wildly different landscapes and centuries, quietly persisting through every empire that rose and fell around it. This is Nigella sativa. The world simply calls it black seed, or black cumin. Its biography spans 4,000 years. Ancient Egypt pressed it into oil for pharaohs. The Quran declared it a cure for every disease except death. The knowledge arrived long before the explanation did, the way willow bark relieved headaches for centuries before anyone discovered aspirin hiding within it. Watch the oil emerge, dark, dense, almost reluctant, pooling slowly in the stone vessel like something that knows its own value. Cut to a modern cold press extraction facility, stainless steel and controlled temperature, performing the identical process with clinical precision. Different century, same seed, same oil. What changed is our ability to look inside it. The compound at the center of everything is called thymoquinone, a molecule that does something researchers did not expect and could not initially explain. It crosses the blood-retinal barrier. In plain language, it gets inside the eye. And once inside, it begins working in ways science is only now carefully mapping. Watch the dimming cells. Now watch them brighten. Each glowing point moving through this animated bloodstream is a thymoquinone molecule, small enough and structurally unique enough to do something most compounds cannot. It crosses the blood-retinal barrier. That boundary exists to protect the eye from harmful substances, but thymoquinone navigates it. Once inside retinal tissue, it begins embedding at the cellular level. Here is why that matters. The retina is one of the most metabolically demanding tissues in the entire human body, consuming oxygen at a rate comparable to the brain. That intensity has a cost. It generates enormous oxidative stress. Free radicals accumulate. Cells begin to fail. That was not an isolated finding. That was the beginning of a trail. What stopped me, she says, was a 2014 paper out of Iran. Patients with dry eye syndrome, people who had genuinely not responded well to conventional drops, were applying a diluted black seed oil preparation directly to the eyelid margin. She pauses, letting the methodology land before the results. After 60 days, tear production had increased significantly. Corneal surface damage had measurably improved. And subjective symptoms, what patients actually reported feeling, were dramatically better. She is not performing excitement, she is reporting it. The narrator follows that trail through the research landscape. A 2018 review catalogued black seed's effects across multiple ocular conditions, from dry eye to glaucoma pressure reduction to protection against diabetic retinopathy. A 2020 study found thymoquinone protected retinal ganglion cells, the cells that transmit visual signals to the brain, from oxidative damage, the same damage that drives macular degeneration. A 2022 animal study found thymoquinone reduced intraocular pressure, the key driver of glaucoma damage, by nearly 30%. These were not isolated findings scattered across fringe journals. They were peer-reviewed, methodologically sound, and pointing in the same direction. Graphics illuminate the eye's anatomy as each condition is named. The retina, the macula, the optic nerve lighting up in sequence, each one a territory where this ancient compound appears to leave a measurable protective mark. The science is young, but the signal is consistent, and it is growing louder. The narrator lets that number sit in the air for a moment. No music, no transition. Just the weight of what it means for millions of people managing glaucoma with limited options. The screen divides. On the left, a retinal scan showing the characteristic damage of oxidative stress, thinning layers, compromised tissue, the quiet erosion that happens before most patients notice anything is wrong. On the right, retinal tissue from a subject supplemented with thymoquinone across a controlled trial period. The difference requires no medical training to see. The tissue looks different. It looks healthier. What thymoquinone appears to do, with increasing consistency across independent studies, is act as a targeted antioxidant and anti-inflammatory agent specifically within ocular tissue. A jar of black seeds rests on the desk beside her. The pace slows. We travel to a small village in Egypt, where the light falls differently. Softer, older somehow. An elderly woman named Fatima sits in her courtyard. She is grinding black seeds in a stone mortar, the way she has done every morning for 70 years. Her granddaughter sits nearby, watching her hands. Fatima learned this from her mother. Her mother learned it from hers. A small amount of black seed oil, pressed gently along the eyelid, for infections, for fatigue, for eyes worn down by a lifetime of sun and dust and labour. She does not call it medicine, she calls it food, she calls it care, only a clear-eyed reckoning with how knowledge gets valued, and by whom, and why, and at what cost to the people waiting for answers. It does not appear in mortality statistics or hospital budgets. It lives in the gap between what was known and what was believed worthy of knowing. For generations, women like Fatima carried precise, embodied knowledge, which seeds, which roots, which preparations did something measurable for the body. They passed it hand to hand, mortar to mortar, without clinical trials or peer review. And for generations, institutions received that knowledge with a polite smile and quietly set it aside. The Western medical system is now spending millions of dollars to rediscover what Fatima never forgot. Laboratories in Edinburgh and Nebraska are confirming, with sophisticated equipment and controlled methodologies, what a grandmother in a Cairo courtyard already knew. There is no bitterness in acknowledging this, and that distinction matters enormously. The narrator's tone shifts, quieter, more deliberate. Because in health storytelling, precision is not a formality, it is a form of respect. So let us be precise. For dry eye syndrome, the evidence is the strongest. Multiple human clinical trials have examined black seed oil's effect on the ocular surface, and the results are consistent. Tear film stability improves. Corneal surface health improves. Patient-reported symptoms, the burning, the grittiness, the fatigue, improve measurably. Dr. Osai Bonsu taps the diagram. She is not excited in the way of someone selling something. She is excited in the way of someone who has spent years looking for signal inside noise and finally found it. For macular degeneration, the picture is promising but incomplete. Early data, drawn primarily from animal models and cell studies, shows thymoquinone actively protecting the macula from oxidative deterioration. The mechanism is compelling. The molecule targets precisely the kind of free radical damage that erodes central vision over time. But definitive human trial confirmation does not yet exist. Those trials are ongoing. For glaucoma, animal studies demonstrated intraocular pressure reduction of meaningful scale, with early human studies suggesting similar potential, again, not yet definitive. The narrator is deliberate here. Potential is not proof, but potential, when consistent, is worth watching closely. For overall retinal health, the evidence base is strongest of all. Antioxidant protection, demonstrated repeatedly across independent studies, points towards something significant, not treating disease already present, but shielding the retina from the oxidative accumulation that quietly builds toward it. The narrator names this clearly: prevention, not cure. It lets the silence do exactly what silence is built to do. On the left, a premium bottle of eye drops, $45, clinical white packaging, a product millions reach for without question. On the right, a small cloth bag of black seeds, and a modest bottle of cold-pressed black seed oil, together costing less than half as much, lasting twice as long. The narrator lets the image settle before speaking. Here is the question that does not appear in peer-reviewed journals. It does not fit neatly into methodology sections or conclusion paragraphs, but it lives in every examination room, in every conversation between a patient who has been managing something for years and a doctor who is running 12 minutes behind. Why didn't anyone tell me about this sooner? The question hangs in the air. The split screen holds. She is a woman paying attention. She is outside now, in her garden, morning light falling across her face. She is watering plants. Her hands are steady. She is not reaching for eye drops. 7 months ago, she began taking half a teaspoon of cold-pressed black seed oil each morning, stirred into warm water. At night, she applies a small amount, carefully diluted in carrier oil, along her eyelid margin. She learned the method from the research. She followed it precisely. She is careful with her language when she talks about what happened next. She does not call it a cure. She is deliberate about that word, what it carries, what it promises, what it can wrongly take away from someone still suffering. By every researcher, every grandmother, every patient who was told to simply accept the dimming. Margaret looks directly into the camera. No script, no prompting. She says the drops were her first thought every single morning for 11 years. Now some mornings she forgets they exist. Her eyes feel present, she says, like they belong to her face again. Not like a condition she manages before she is allowed to start her day. She pauses. She is careful, the way people are careful when something real has happened to them, and they do not want to oversell it. She does not know if it is the thymoquinone, or the ritual, or something she cannot name. She does not know if it is science or luck, but she knows how she feels. Seeds fill the frame, scattered across open fields, resting in glass jars, piled high in open-air markets in Cairo, New Delhi, and Istanbul. Hands appear. Old hands, young hands, calloused hands, smooth hands, all reaching, all touching, all carrying something that has travelled 4,000 years to arrive here. Then the eyes begin. Hundreds of them. Old eyes carrying decades of light. Young eyes still learning what the world looks like. Eyes behind thick glasses. Eyes squinting into afternoon sun. Eyes half hidden in shadow. Each one distinct. Each one searching. The narrator's pace slows, deliberately, almost tenderly. We live in an age that has confused pharmaceutical complexity for sophistication, that has looked at ancient knowledge and seen superstition where there was wisdom, that has measured value in patents rather than in generations. The montage breathes. The music is nearly nothing, just space, just air. The images carry everything the words cannot. The body has never asked to be fixed. It has only ever asked to be fed. Let that be said plainly without apology. No seed, no supplement, no drop pressed from any plant on any continent will do that. Vision is complex, fragile, shaped by genetics and time, and 1,000 variables no single compound can fully address. But that is not the only question worth asking. The more honest question is this. What does the eye actually need to protect itself? What raw materials does it reach for when oxidative stress accumulates, when inflammation quietly builds, when decades of light and labour begin to leave their mark? The evidence, growing steadily across laboratories and clinical settings, suggests black seed may offer exactly that. Not a fix, not a miracle, a form of nourishment the body already understands. On a black screen, simple white text appears. No music, no narration, just words. Current human trials on Nigella sativa and ocular health are ongoing at multiple universities worldwide. Consult your ophthalmologist before changing any eye care regimen. The card stays long enough to be read twice. This is not a legal formality tucked beneath the credits. It is not a whispered disclaimer rushed past in the final seconds. It is a deliberate, unhurried statement, placed where it cannot be missed, given the silence it deserves. Throughout this film, extraordinary things have been said. Carefully sourced, precisely qualified, honestly presented, but extraordinary nonetheless. Wonder without responsibility is just spectacle. This documentary has never been interested in spectacle. The disclaimer is the final act of the same integrity that shaped every frame before it. It trusts the viewer to hold two things at once: genuine scientific curiosity and personal medical caution. The screen remains black, still, quiet. The oud begins softly, a single string, then another, building into the same melody that accompanied the ancient footage of Egypt, the village courtyard, the stone mortar. It does not swell dramatically. It simply continues, the way old knowledge continues, quietly and without announcement. Names appear on screen. Researchers, translators, farmers, Fatima, Margaret. The people who carried this story from the fields to the laboratory to this moment. The music begins to thin. Notes stretch further apart. The silence between them grows. And then, before the last frame disappears entirely, a sound returns. Soft, unhurried, unmistakable. Morning birds. The same ones that opened the film. The circle closes without ceremony, without fanfare, without a final push toward anything. Just a quiet morning. Just light through a curtain. Just the world, continuing. A little more clearly seen than before.